Hi everyone, welcome to our Instagram Live Q&A today. I'm just going to take a couple moments to set up and invite our panelists, so bear with me while I do that. Hi Courtney.
Hi.
Hi Tim.
Hey there.
Welcome. So I started off a little bit earlier just so I can invite you and make sure everything's set up before noon. So any of you who are joining early, welcome. And we'll just wait another minute or two before we actually kick things off.
Okay. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning.
All right, for everyone who's joining us, thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait another minute or so before we get started, just so everyone who wants to join is able to join. Welcome so far. My name is Cubby Choxy, and I'm with the Rethink Waste Project. And we also have Courtney and Tim on here as well, but we'll wait another minute or so before we do introductions. All right, I think we can get started. So for everyone who's still joining us, welcome. And for everyone who's already been here, welcome as well. My name again is Cubby Choxy, and I'm with the Rethink Waste Project of the Environmental Center. And today we are doing this Instagram Live Q&A for America Recycles Day, also Deschutes Recycles Day as well. And this is actually a pretty big deal for me. As some of you who know me know that I've been actually off most social media on my personal end, and I don't have a smartphone currently, so this has been a little tricky to just get everything set up, but I really appreciate especially Courtney and Tim working on short notice to get this together for today. And I'm really excited because I know there's a lot of questions that we get often about recycling that folks just have a lot of questions and are confused about certain things and always feel like they're not sure they're doing it right. So I really
Hey, Kai, I can't.
joined in January of this year. And my manager, who actually does a lot of these events in the past, is currently out on parental leave. So we're wishing the best for Adara. Hope she's enjoying time with the baby. And what the Rethink Waste Project is one of the programs of the Environmental Center. And the Environmental Center works to embed sustainability into daily life in Central Oregon. And the Rethink Waste Project in particular envisions a community that understands the upstream and downstream impacts of using Earth's resources and makes responsible decisions about the consumption, use, and disposal of materials. So basically, we try to make sure that we are using materials in a responsible way. So that's some of the work we do.
Hey, Kai, can you hear me? Kai, I can't hear you if you're talking to me.
Tim, I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear Kai?
No, we can't hear you. Environmental Center. While you guys are working on that, I assume that the other attendees can hear Tim and I, so maybe we can just quickly introduce ourselves while they're working through and troubleshooting that. My name is Courtney Voss. I'm the Municipal Manager for Public Services. My responsibility is to implement programs and services related to our franchise agreements. So I do a lot of work with our operations team to make sure that we're collecting garbage and recycling on a daily basis throughout the city of Bend, Redmond, Sisters, Lapine, Deschutes County, Crook County, and Prineville, and down into Klamath County. I also do a lot of the education work on behalf of Republic Services. So I work really closely with the Environmental Center and with Deschutes County and Tim to kind of advance education and outreach initiatives. So that's me. I think also Kavi had asked us to talk a little bit about our I think the question was related to an interesting trash story. I've only been in this role for a little over a year, about a year and a half at this point. So my operations folks have a lot more interesting stories about trash, but within the past week alone, we've had some pretty exciting experiences with kittens. So in the kind of waste industry and particularly haulers, we'll often find stray cats in our yards and in our trucks trying to get warm in the wintertime. So last week we rescued 5 different kittens and they all got homes and they're very, very cute. So that was the highlight of my week last week.
All right. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney.
So my name's Tim.
Can you hear me now?
So my name's, yeah, we can.
Perfect. Go ahead, Tim.
All right. My name's Tim Brownell. I'm the Director of the Solid Waste Department for Deschutes County. We operate the not landfill as well as oversee the franchises for the collection and recovery of recyclables, solid waste, composting, etc. So we kind of manage the system here in the county. I've been in this role and here in Deschutes County for the last year and a half. Before that, I've been in a number of spots. First got into setting up the recycling program in the city of San Francisco in the 90s, and then have been involved in recycling, composting, and more recently solid waste disposal over the last 30 years or so. I will say that I literally started in recycling for peanuts. When I was 10, my older brother was 16, and he needed gas money, and I grew up in Philadelphia. And back then, this was many years ago, we were closer to World War II than we are to today. There were paper scrap brokers, and people would put newspapers at the curb well before curbside recycling, but garbage trucks had a little section for them, and they would take those bundles to these scrap dealers. when my brother had me, he would drive his VW bus, and he had me jumping out, grabbing those bundles of newspaper, and we would take them to the scrap yard, and they would pay money for it, and that was his gas money. And he literally paid me with peanut M&Ms. So that was my introduction to recycling at age 10. But yeah, that never got out of me. So yeah.
I love that story, Tim. Thanks,
Yeah.
both of you. Sorry for some of the audio difficulties. I think it was something to do with some stray AirPods. But thank you for sharing those stories. And just for any newcomers who are just joining us right now, so we're doing a live Q&A with local recycling experts, Courtney and Tim. And we are going to start kicking off the Q&A portion of this. We do have some collected questions already. So just as to share with folks, we shared this on a couple different channels in different ways. This was shared on Reddit, which got a lot of engagement and comments. It was also shared in our emails, on our Instagram. So feel free to share how you heard about this or how you're joining. And some of the questions that we collected from those other channels, I'll share and ask those right now. But we also want to prioritize any live questions. So if you haven't had a chance to ask a question already or previously send it to us, feel free to ask it in the comments, and we will try our best to answer as many of those as possible during this Q&A. The first question I'll actually kick it off with is that, and this was a general question that a few folks had actually asked and supported, and it kind of goes around, is recycling actually happening? So there were a couple questions. I'll read a few of them just to give a sense of what was asked. So the first question was, is any bin recycling actually being recycled? Doesn't it go to Portland, where it used to go to China for recycling, but then China stopped taking it, so now it sits? Or is that a rumor? And that was a question that was asked on Reddit, and then there were some also other questions just specifically talking about cardboard recycling or glass recycling. And so there's a lot of people that are skeptical or just have questions about how effective it is to recycle. And I'm wondering if both of you can address that.
Yeah, Courtney, do you mind if I jump onto this first?
Go for it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I want to address this, particularly what happened in 2018, the beginning of 2018, was something that got a lot of press, was a huge disruption to the recycling system, and that was China making the decision to limit the amount of recyclable materials that were being sent to them. And this was actually a very good decision on their part. What was happening is that programs around the country were accepting materials, baling mixed paper together, baling all sorts of plastics together, shipping it overseas to China, and putting the onus on China to do the predominance of separation, particularly of plastic materials. And their system for doing that was pretty rudimentary. And it was being done all throughout the country by small individual homeowners, households. There's an amazing documentary called Plastics China, which tells the story of how recycling was and plastics were handled there. It was a major environmental issue. A lot of plastics were being burned. Those that couldn't be recycled were being burned or put into rivers and streams. And it was very, very problematic for China's environment. So they made a policy decision not to accept recyclables from Europe and the United States, and actually throughout Asia. So it was a major disruption, but it caused programs to really look at how are they actually separating and sorting materials. What's happening today is that yes, the materials you are putting out at the curb that are recyclable are being recycled. We are seeing that 15 to 20% of the materials that are in a curbside bin are not recyclable under the program. So when they get shipped to Portland, they are going through recycling processing facilities. They are being separated, but the material that is not recyclable is being pulled out. And there are times when other materials that are recyclable get kind of caught in the crossfire. so to speak. So some of the recyclable material, it gets pulled out with the contaminant material. But predominantly, I would say 75%, 80% of the material that are being put in the curbside bins are being captured, are being separated, and are being sent to market. So I'll stop it there and hand it to Courtney.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would just kind of add to that, or maybe emphasize, is that recycling is a process, and so I think there's this sometimes misunderstanding that the process is really just a relationship between the people that are putting material in their bin and the hauler that's collecting it and taking it to a recycling center, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And it's a process that involves both kind of the consumer putting things in the right bin at the right time on the right day, and the haulers picking that up and transporting it to the right place. And that step of the process, I think, is working pretty well. And then it gets to these recycling facilities where it gets sorted, and then it goes to an end market to actually be turned into something new. So it's a multi-step, pretty complicated movement of material from one state to another, essentially, or one use to another. And so that is happening. I think, to Tim's point, I think it's happening much more than maybe people realize, but there's still opportunities for improvement. And a lot of that, it has to do with creating market demand and creating a use for those materials once they're actually processed and ready for reuse.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing. I think what the disruption in 2018 in China actually has created a lot more transparency. However, the stories that came out from that period have been very difficult to kind of counter, because that was a lot of clickbait, and that was a sensational read for a lot of people, or an "I told you so" moment. But no, it's the system is working. I think that the challenge is really getting people to understand what is recyclable and what is not, and we can speak to that a little further in the program.
Thank you both, and I think you raised some important points regarding the system working as for the purpose it is for. And I know, Tim, you had also shared this video in advance, and it's something that I tried to share as well. It's shared in our email that went out, and also on Reddit and some of the other channels. That video called "Chasing Arrows: the kind of truth about recycling." And it's a really good 10-minute short video. So for anyone that is interested in learning more about this, about the recycling system, and some of the issues with it, but also how it is still something that's helpful to do, that's a really good video to watch. And I think both of you kind of, part of this is like recycling right and reducing contamination, is I think both of you are mentioning. So some of our questions do specifically have to do with that. I think folks are wanting to make sure they're recycling right and want to get some more clarity on that. So one of the common questions, and this is something I've actually seen confuse a lot of people, including many folks I know and many of my friends. And the question is, it says, "I am confused as to why the paper takeout containers and pizza boxes aren't okay to recycle. From a podcast I listened to recently, pizza boxes are absolutely able to be recycled. Why is there such a difference of opinions on these things?"
Courtney, you can start with that.
I don't know, Tim, if you so I think a clean pizza box is recyclable. It's cardboard. What we typically don't like is dirty things. So to the extent that a pizza box is covered in grease and cheese and sauce, that's not something that we want in the recycling cart. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. And Tim, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Yeah, and we are, I think, clarifying in the brochures this year and postings online that pizza boxes are, very, very legitimate. Again, a lot of information is long-standing and old. The grease and on the pizza box used to be a real problem in the cleaning systems and the wastewater systems and paper mills. They've kind of solved that. They can handle some degree of grease and food product, but ideally the approach is take that white liner. If you have a pizza box, it's got a liner in it, throw that liner away, recycle the pizza box. And again, that's just the pizza delivery boxes. Frozen boxes, things that come out of your freezer, are similar to a lot of the takeout containers. They actually have plastic liners and other things that make it really difficult for the recycling process, or they have a chemical in them called wet strength, which makes it so that it can't break down. The chemistry doesn't allow it to break down. It's actually why it's stable in the freezer. So pizza boxes, yes. Takeout containers, no thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's an easy way to remember it, especially if it's clean, that you can recycle it. That did actually bring to mind, Tim, especially kind of the people you're in different kind of questions or things like that. I had an email just a few minutes before this started today, and it was specifically mentioning something regarding having conflicting information. So I think they mentioned that they had actually reached out to Republic Services to clarify some items that were vaguely accepted as recyclables. But then when they went down the list, they found out that many of the items on there are actually not. And I did try to get some more clarity on which specific items they're mentioning, but is this something that you can, Courtney, or both of you can just mention in general why that might be the case?
I guess I need to see what the list was that you're referring to, probably to be able to speak to it. Broadly, I'll just say that there is and has been quite a bit of confusion over what is and isn't recyclable. It varies market to market. So things that are recyclable currently here in Bend are not necessarily recyclable in Portland. And that's not actually whether or not the item itself can be recycled. It's whether or not the hauler that is collecting that material has a MRF or a sorting facility that can accept it. So that's where some of that confusion stems from, and it varies. If you move from one place to another, you may end up with a different list of things that can go in your curbside bin. That's going to change, thankfully, and Tim can probably speak to that more, but within the next year or so, we're going to see a universal that will make it, and for haulers, because we'll know exactly what we're supposed to be collecting, what we shouldn't be, and it'll be the same everywhere in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that for a moment. There's something called the Recycling Modernization Act that passed in 2021. Rule what they call rulemaking, but by July of 2025, there will be a list of universal materials that are accepted throughout the state. So what is collected at the curb in Portland will be collected in Bend, will be collected in Pendleton, will be in Eugene. In addition to that, producers and manufacturers of the products and packaging that are in these programs or want to be in the programs are going to have to start to financially participate and support these programs. Right now, that onus is completely on us as ratepayers, and we have to deal with the end of life of these products. The manufacturers do not. That's getting switched. That list will be expanding the materials that are collected at the curb, but also collected at drop-off stations around the county. So things like plastic film and styrofoam, clamshells, the plastic clamshells that you get berries in, those sorts of things. Those will not be collected curbside, but there will be expanded opportunities and requirements that they have to be collected by cities and the county by that time as well. So there will be some changes coming forward, not as quickly as we'd like, but it's trying to be coordinated statewide, and the infrastructure to be built out to be able to support more recovery of more materials.
Thank you, Tim. And the audio cut off again for me for just a little bit of that, but I just want to highlight that I'm personally and also as a programmer really excited about the Recycling Modernization Act and its implementation. I was really, especially the extended producer responsibility piece of it as well. And I was really, I went to a conference recently and I was really excited to hear that we were one of 3 states that has that and is working on that in place, and we're kind of in the forefront of this. So all of us, all of you joining, if you aren't aware of that, Oregon as a state has really does seem to be taking leadership on this, which is really feels good to be part of a state that's doing that.
Yeah. And let me add one other thing. Part of that is also a little bit in what they call truth in labeling. So they're really looking at, the questions that we always get asked is what plastics are recyclable? People get really frustrated, particularly by the plastics industry and those chasing arrows that are on the bottom of the container. Those chasing arrows truly mean nothing. They don't tell you that it's recyclable or not. The state of Oregon is implementing something where if it is not recyclable, there will be a cross mark, a hash mark through that chasing arrow sign, indicating it is not recyclable. So they're trying to make that chasing arrow emblem actually mean something.
Wow, that's awesome. I knew about the truth. I kind of had heard about the truth and labeling piece, but I didn't realize that that's what it included or meant.
Yeah.
So that's really, I'm really glad to hear that. I will go back to a couple more specific questions that we've had in terms of materials. Actually, first I'll just start with this one quick question that seems slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I'm sure it's something that many people are wondering. And the question is, my only question would be, when is my glass getting picked up? And I think maybe to give it a little bit more context, maybe a way to answer it would be to maybe provide, I guess, maybe folks are wondering why there are either delays or why at certain times the glass pickup is being canceled. And I think maybe that's a good opportunity to maybe talk a little bit more about why that's happening.
Yeah, it's a really fair and good question, and it's not the level of service that anybody wants to provide. I mean, I can only speak for Republic, but we want to be providing the right service on the right day, consistent with what the customer is expecting. So, that's not what we want it to be. I will say, glass is not an easy commodity for us to collect for a whole host of reasons. It's very manual. So if you've ever seen our glass drivers go out to collect glass from your community, we do it with a truck and trailer, and we have somebody literally bending down and picking up your glass cart and dumping it in every single stop 800 times in a day. And so it can be difficult to keep that staffed, frankly. And I think just generally, we're not the only business, certainly, that's struggling with staffing. None of that is an excuse, and we have taken some steps to try and make some improvements there. And the goal is to ensure that we're actually providing the services in a manner that's consistent with what customers deserve. So don't know if that's the best answer, but that's the truth. That's where we're at. And also, I guess in the meantime, if your glass is really piling up, hopefully we've seen some improvement within the past 2 to 3 weeks. But we do have a glass depot at Not Landfill at the Deschutes Recycling Center, and you can always call Republic Services and let us know that we haven't serviced you. But I do keep a pretty good, very large list of delayed glass customers. So we are aware of the problem and actively working on it.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up that the county's quite aware of it. We're working with cities. We're actually trying to modify our agreements so there are some consequences for the pickups if they do not happen that may encourage, let's use that word, the collection every time it's supposed to be collected. So.
Thank you both for answering that. Again, I was told to make periodic welcomes to folks who might be joining later on. So just again, welcome if you're joining us. It's live Q&A with local recycling experts that we're doing today for America and Deschutes Recycles Day. We're going to go to a live question that someone asked in the chat. It's by Rad LLC. Hi, Russell. So the question is there a possibility of a program where specific sets of items could be pulled out of the trash and be made available for local resale? Things like appliances, electronics, furniture, etc.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are programs around the country that uh, have at the landfills or transfer stations kind of reuse opportunities, recovery and reuse. The county's looking at that now. That is something that we're also looking at doing the processing of construction demolition debris and doing recovery of materials from there. That would also allow for not only just the recovery of clean wood products, but potentially even reusable lumber, that sort of thing. So we're looking at the viability of establishing some sort of reuse program that would require probably a building, a structure where we could resell it, or figure out how do we redistribute it into the current thrift system here in town. I mean, what we encourage people to do is as best you can before you put it in the garbage, see if there is a thrift opportunity for it, or Craigslist, or Facebook free market, any of those options. But yes, the county is looking at whether that would be a viable option for us as well.
And I'll just add on that note that the Rethink Waste Project also holds repair cafes periodically throughout the year. So if you do have some of those appliances or electronics or things that have an issue but could be fixed, then we have local volunteers who help fix items of all kinds, from clothes to electronics, and it's all free. So we do have those that periodically throughout the year, again, to try and focus on that reduce aspect or the reuse aspect before going to the recycling aspect of the hierarchy. Thanks, Tim. Did you want to add anything to that, Courtney? You don't have to if it feels answered. Okay. And I just want to again put a reminder for folks who are on the live, if you wanted to ask any questions, you can just drop it in the comment and I'll make sure we can get that asked. But we do still have more questions that were collected already. So this is there was a series of a couple of questions. I think they're somewhat related. But maybe, I guess the first question, I'll frame it in this way. So the question deals with plastics. And this is something I saw, especially on Reddit. There were a lot of questions and a lot of skepticism about plastics recycling in particular. Folks felt that glass and paper and cardboard products were, there was more clarity and it felt like that was being recycled. With plastics, it did feel that there was a lot of misinformation and not clarity on which plastics were being recycled and which aren't. So I think just a general answer or helpful tip that you might have in terms of which plastics are recyclable would be helpful. But the question that was asked here was, what types of plastics can be recycled, and do the numbers on them mean anything here?
So I'll start on that. The numbers mean a little bit. You can use the numbers 1 and 2 are the ones that are generally recyclable if they are in the form of a bottle or a tub. And that also extends to plastics number 4s and 5s. Those are usually tubs. But that's really it. It's anything in a bottle form or a tub form. Up to larger than 4 ounces or so, and up to a 5-gallon tub, for example. But yeah, I would just bottles, tubs. That's the form we'll take. Other than that, no. So you'll see the clamshells. They're currently not accepted in curbside programs here. They will be accepted in drop-off programs in the future, but not in the curbside program, and that's going to be statewide.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize that we typically prefer people to Tim's point, know the type of item that can be put in your recyclable cart. Don't depend on the number in the arrows, because that can be a little bit misleading. In terms of whether or not it's actually getting recycled, yes, I mean, it gets taken to a processor in Portland, a sorter in Portland. In the case of Republic, the majority of all of our plastics at this point are being, or soon to be, directed to our polymer center. And so that location is going to be taking a ton of the plastics from the Northwest region and turning them into little plastic pellets that will then get turned back into water bottles and other things. So yes, it is being recycled.
And I think we just had a helpful clarifying question from Neil that says, I heard Tim say bottles and tubs are jugs still accepted as well.
Yes. Yeah, that falls into the form. So anything with a mouth smaller than the base, that's what's called blow molded. It's actually air injected to like a balloon. It pushes it out. That's the type of polymer that actually is recyclable. So a jug is formed in that way as well. So that works. Yep.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard that before, so that's helpful to remember it that way. Thank you. One additional question on the plastics that we also saw quite a few questions regarding, and there was actually some discussion on this, and I'm actually curious about the answer to this as well. And it's kind of more talking about soft plastics or plastic bags or plastic film. And the question, I guess the one specific question was, can we recycle bubble wrap and those larger airbags with our grocery bags?
Say that again, the last part.
Sure. Can we recycle bubble wrap in the larger like airbags that are come with like packages and stuff with the grocery bags?
Yeah, were you going to respond, Courtney?
No, I was just going to say we wouldn't likely take those in your curbside recycle cart.
Yeah.
I know that, their plastic bags in particular create huge problems for us. They gum up our machinery. Tim, you may know more about kind of current technologies in the recycling space that deal with bags, but I know that like some of our grocery stores will take them back. I'm not sure what they do with them. But in terms of us as a hauler, we don't want them, and we don't want bubble wrap or plastic wrap either.
Yeah, and so the question usually goes towards, are they acceptable at the Wincos and Safeway and those types of containers? So the point of purchase is really the only place that you can recycle the plastic bags. It's really any plastic that you can stretch to a little degree. So like a garbage bag, a grocery bag. Bubble wrap, I believe, is acceptable in those programs, but they really don't want all your bubble wrap because they have a small garbage can, right? They undersize those. That material, the plastic bag material, is not going back into plastic bags. It generally will go into plastic lumber. So a lot of them have contracts with people like Trex, which makes plastic lumber. So the plastic lumber itself isn't recyclable. So it's really that we encourage people, don't use plastic bags, try and minimize your use of those bubble wrap, but I know you get them. Recycle them, but know that's it's only going to have one more use after that. It's not circular. It's interned in a different product.
I don't know if I can ask a question since we have Tim on here and he is the expert of all experts. So as cities have moved to the requirements related to not having single-use plastic bags at grocery stores, you've seen an increase in the number of those thicker plastics. Can you talk a little bit about those? Are those being used and reused in any way? I mean, Republic doesn't like them, but we don't like them for other reasons. So if you could just kind of talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that those also can go back into the point of sale recovery stations. So you can take, it's a heavier duty, like it's 8 mil or 10 mil, which just means it's thicker, but it's still generally a polypropylene or a PET or HDPE that is recyclable, again, for plastic lumber. So you can put those back in the Safeway or Winco carts. What they are designed is that they can actually be used for a lot longer. But whether people actually use them many more times is the big question.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that might be a good time for me to just mention something that I've been meaning to mention at the start of this. Again, we had some new folks join, so I just want to welcome everyone to this live Q&A local recycling experts today for America and Deschutes Recycling Day. And we've been answering specific questions in terms of what's recyclable. And one of the things I did want to mention is that the Rethink Waste Project does a lot of work on the waste hierarchy, which includes reduce, reuse, recycle. And so I do, again, want to, I think, use Tim's comments and answers as an opportunity to kind of highlight that the most impact for folks, especially at home, who are trying to have more of an impact and be more sustainable in their materials and consumption habits, is had at the reduce and reuse levels. And then recycling is really good for all the things that we still end up needing to have. There's no other way around it. So especially on the topic of plastic bags, I think that's a good one to just mention, that especially for folks who haven't made the switch to reusable bags or are still working on that switch, it is something that I think has the most impact, is it especially having a reusable bag that you are able to reuse. And this is something that took me a while to kind of just change the habit and be able to have that in my car when I needed it instead of forgetting at home every time, especially as someone with ADHD. And I think the trick for me that worked was just leaving them next to my keys. So when the next time I went to the car, I could just put them in my car and leave them there and have them available. And it has made a huge difference in terms of how many bags, paper or plastic, that I have to use or get, even if it's a reusable bag, if it's not being reused. I know there's been some studies about the life cycle analysis of it actually end up having more of an impact in that way. So for many of these things, where possible, reduce and reuse has the most impact. So looking at and seeing if there are ways to make that switch where you don't need to keep having single-use items in the first place. I just wanted to share that personal thought real quick. Again, for folks who are on the live, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the comments. We'll only answer a few more. I do have some collected questions, but I also want to give an opportunity for anyone who's watching to get their question answered before we close with the questions. And Courtney and Tim, are you still okay with a couple more questions? Okay.
Sure.
So this is another question that I've also wondered, and I'm hoping I'm doing it right, but I guess I'll find out now. I know my understanding is that junk mail is recyclable. I don't know how much that matters on the quality or content of the material. But the question that was asked was, what's the current state of recycling envelopes with plastic windows? I remember hearing at some point that those don't pass the test year.
Yeah, so those are acceptable. Ideally, if you have the time and energy, pull those windows out and throw them out. That plastic will not get recycled. That envelope will go with paper fiber. Years ago, that was really problematic. The glues that held the plastic in place, as well as the plastic itself, really created problems in the pulping systems that they use to recover those fibers. They've really enhanced the cleaning systems. Those are a regular occurrence. They've also, a lot of the printers and packagers have changed the glues, the adhesives that they use to hold those in place, so that they're water soluble. But the system itself is designed now that they have the screens and the cleaning capability that they can pull that out. So don't hesitate to throw up any of your junk mail and envelopes into your paper recycling.
Thank you. Okay. One more question that's specific, and then maybe we can do a quick rapid fire round with a couple of different materials folks that about. But this one question was, which I can also relate to as a dog owner. I've been storing these bags But the question was, is there any place that will recycle dog food bags? And if not, how can we get dog food companies to use paper products for their feed? I think the second question might not be answerable by you, but maybe the first question, or if you know of any uses or ways to, to dispose of them better.
I know that Petco, PetSmart, and some of the local pet food stores here in town do take them back, and you can recycle them at the pet store that you purchased from. Other than that, I don't think, Tim, that there's any other place to recycle them at this point.
No, there's not, and that's because they want to protect the dog food, so that's a multi-layer packaging. It's plastic. It's fiber on both the front and the back, but usually a plastic in the middle of it. Yeah, it's probably 30-40% plastic within that packaging at least. So yeah, unless there's a program done by your pet store, I'm not aware of any opportunities for that.
Thank you. All right, are you both down for a quick rapid fire round? I don't know how many materials I have here, but maybe if anyone has quick 1 or 2 word materials, they can throw it in the comments too, and we'll see how fast we can go through some of these. The first one was lids from tin cans, removed with a can opener or with a pull tab. Can you recycle those? All right.
Yes.
Aluminum foil, can it be recycled if it has food debris?
It's preferred if you clean it, if you've, or that it's predominantly clean. This is a question, this goes beyond foil, like if a peanut butter jar or something like that, we want it predominantly food free, okay? So peanut butter jar, it's got to pass the spatula test. Can you take a spatula, pull the materials out? That's clean enough. You don't have to run it through your dishwasher. It's kind of the same with aluminum foil. Try and get as much of that food off of there as possible, and then go ahead and recycle it.
That's actually really good to know. I think I was in the impression that even a little bit of food would make it non-recyclable. So this seems like it's a little more forgiving, but still being mindful to try and clean it.
Yeah.
Not like scrub.
The standard is kind of clean-ish. Clean-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Clean-ish. What can people do with batteries?
Don't put them in your trash.
Yeah. Take them to the Deschutes Recycling or any of the transfer sites around the county. They're acceptable there, and then we'll properly dispose or recycle them. And batteries, particularly anything that's the little button batteries, if they have the CR on them, that means it's a lithium battery, which is flammable. And that's a real concern. We're getting, particularly in recycling facilities, people are putting, cards, birthday cards that have a little, you open it up and it sings to you. It's got a battery in it, and that battery many times can actually be flammable. So we're having recycling facilities all around the country dealing with floor fires or fires in their facilities. So really be mindful about batteries and trying to keep them not only out of your garbage, but certainly out of your recycling stream.
And I just want to reemphasize that they will also catch our trucks on fire. And
right.
So batteries are really, really not a good thing to put in your garbage or your recycling. And there are facilities, places you can dispose of them for free throughout the county. So please do that.
And just to make sure I heard you correctly, Tim, when you answered Deschutes Recycling, because I have basically, it seems like I just keep adding to my battery pile at home, and I don't know what to do with it, and it just sits there. So you said it can be dropped off at a Deschutes Recycling transfer station?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a cost with it associated with it? Okay.
Nope.
How about light bulbs?
Fluorescent light bulbs, or any kind of light bulb. You can put a household light bulb in the garbage, fluorescent light bulbs. We would like those to be delivered to any one of the transfer stations where they'll be recycled.
Yeah, the fluorescents are hazardous, so we don't want those in any garbage or recycling stream curbside.
Okay, that's good to know. And I just want to call out that Lindsay posted a comment saying that she just called Ben Vilko, and they do take the feed bags, including dog food. So that's one for sure place that for any folks who are watching who are not sure what to do with the dog food, I have a pile of them in my garage. So now I know what I can do with those dog food bags that I don't want to throw in the trash. And a very holiday timely question is, can folks recycle wrapping paper and tissue paper used in gift bags?
Yeah, over the holidays they can, as long as it's foil free. Take the ribbons off, try and pull as much of the Scotch tape off, but those materials are recyclable as long as they're foil and glitter free.
Foil and glitter free. Okay. That is good to know. All right. I think we've answered a lot of questions. Thank you for that. Last call for any questions from our live listeners if they wanted to add something to the comments. Otherwise, we can proceed to kind of wrapping this up and also providing an opportunity for our panelists and experts to offer any closing thoughts and remarks. Any last questions before we move on to that? All right, I think we can move on to that. So I think what I'd mentioned to both of you, Tim and Courtney, is giving you an opportunity to kind of provide any final words that you wanted to, and also if you wanted to leave people with anything that to think about in terms of recycling or materials management in general.
So I'll add this. Currently in the United States, the recycling rate is around 30%, somewhere between, according to the US EPA, somewhere between 30 and 32% thereabouts. Here in Deschutes County, it's just about that as well. Of our municipal solid waste stream, 30% is diverted, 70% is disposed of. We can do better than that. A lot of it is, but I think industry has to do better than that. So the materials that are coming into our homes, we want the products. We have some choices about what we're purchasing, the packaging that it comes in. When you make the choice, when you have the choice, make the choice to find the material that's recyclable if you can't find it or don't have the ability to buy it in bulk and reduce the packaging. Recycling works. Recycling, have faith in the recycling system. But I think the one comment I want to make is we're just talking about the municipal solid waste stream. There's a whole industrial waste that occurs. And when any product is manufactured, for every one garbage bag that you put at the curb, there's at least 40 bags of garbage, of waste equivalent that's generated in the manufacture and transport of that product. So if you recycle, you break the extraction curve. If you reuse, you get out of there's still waste within the recycling process and a lot of energy in it. If you can step above that to reducing or reusing, you're having a much greater impact. But all three of them together are really important that we have to do to get ourselves out of this extraordinarily wasteful habits that our economy has. And we've got to get out of a linear path and get into a full circular economy if we have any chance to deal with climate change and the impacts that wasting has. So that's my comment.
And I'll just say ditto Tim.
Yeah.
I will also add that, Republic, I think, and again, I can't speak for Cascade, but I know that they're as committed to this as we are. as haulers are going to work really closely with the county to help support and educate consumers and customers. And I think that collectively we can do a much better job of that, because there shouldn't be confusion over what goes in your bin and what should, and we play a huge role in that. So we're looking forward to kind of stepping up our game in that way, and really providing that support and education to customers, and to the person that brought up glass service. I am on it, and I will get that resolved as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for letting us participate in this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tim and Courtney. And Tim, I guess, and for both, to your closing remarks, I also want to add just a little bit as well. From a personal standpoint, especially, I appreciate, Tim, that especially you pointed out the upstream impacts of it, and it's linked to climate change in particular. And I think I know personally, and I know many members of the community are concerned about that and our kind of lifestyle and consumption habits. And I just wanted to share one quick thing in terms of that, is that I also serve on the City of Bend's Environment and Climate Committee on a personal and individual capacity. And as part of that, as the Waste and Materials Working Group. And one of the things that I was surprised just being on that committee and looking at our community climate action plan for the City of Bend in particular, is, you know, often you hear about, I feel like waste and materials often gets minimized in terms of the impact it has on the climate, especially because I think oftentimes there's a lens of looking at it from a sector-based emission standpoint, where most of the items we're consuming or buying are not produced here, and so the emissions are given to where they were actually produced, which is usually outside of our region. But when you look at a more consumption-based emissions view, I was surprised to find that about half of all our emissions as a city come from consumption of materials, and especially the upstream impacts like you're mentioning. I think folks only often think about downstream impacts of like, oh, it's waste and it's going to go to landfill and there's going to be some emissions of methane and other emissions related to that from the landfill, but it's also, like you mentioned, everything that goes in the process of creating those goods and getting them here and purchasing them, especially things that are single use. And so I guess, at least for me personally, I was looking at my water bottle, and I think especially for us here in Oregon, and especially in Central Oregon, I feel like that seems pretty common and ubiquitous now for everyone to have a reusable water bottle. And I think it's those kinds of changes that we are able to make. I think it's, I often see it as both a policy and systems change, and also an individual, like what can we do to prioritize reusing things or reducing things we don't need. And I think there's some of those changes I think many of us have already made, and I think there's a lot more opportunity that still exists to try and look at those large, especially the materials that we, I guess, consume the most, or that ends up being the most dominant in our landfill, and seeing if there are ways to transition to more reusables. And so I just wanted to mention there's a lot of organizations doing really good work in the reusable space, and that's something I'm personally excited about as well. So hopefully there's more opportunity to bring some of that locally as well. And that's something our program will be working on. So I just wanted to share that as well. I think that's everything. I just, again, want to really thank both of you, Courtney and Tim, just so folks who are watching know that this all came together basically in the last few days. So it was pretty short notice, but both of them were super willing to just hop on, especially on technology like this that seems like I was really nervous about. But they were both willing to troubleshoot it and test it out and do this with us, just so we could answer a lot of community questions. And I think we answered a lot of community questions. I think we answered the majority of them actually, which I'm happy to, but I'm also a little surprised. So that's, I guess I just wanted to say again, thank you. And so for folks again who are watching, today is America Recycles Day, and I keep saying it's also Deschutes Recycles Day. Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'll just also add in terms of a concluding remark for the program itself, for the Rethink Waste Project. Like I mentioned, we do offer a lot of services, and one thing I just want to highlight is that we actually offer, on the subject of reusables, we offer a reusable dishware kit, which you are able to borrow for free for any events. We have up to 4 kits, so for up to events of 100 folks. And it includes plates, bowls, utensils, cups, everything you need for an event. And they're all dishwasher safe as well. So you can reuse those and return them, and it's completely free of service. If you wanted to learn more about it, you can go to our website, rethinkwasteproject.org. So that's one of the services we provide as a community resource that's available to, again, try and reduce our consumption. And then the other thing I mentioned briefly at the start is that we also offer a community innovation fund, which offers up to $5,000 for any ideas that reduce waste in the community. And it is something that anyone can apply for, including businesses, organizations, and individuals. So if you have any ideas where you see something as being really wasteful and you think you could solve that with the help of some funding, that's what it's there for. So you can learn more about that on the rethinkwasteproject.org website as well. All right, I think that's everything. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone. All right, be well.
You too.